Hello, folks. Leftover Monkey back again. All right, today we're going to be talking about Frankenstein Unbound. Yeah, I imagine most people haven't heard of this film, and I wouldn't blame you for not hearing about it. It's a 1990 low budget sci fi horror film, and when I mean low budget, we're talking made for TV budget, but don't let that put you off. Hear me out. They actually do really well with what they're working with, and there's a charm to it. That B-grade film. It just has that likability to it, and it's got a great cast as well: John Hurt, Raul Julia, Bridget Fonda, and Jason Patric. So not bad at all. So what are we in for with this film? Okay, it centers around a scientist, John Buchanan, played by John Hurt, in the not too distant future, 2031, I believe, and he's been contracted by the government to make high-powered weapons, basically to ensure, peace around the world. That's why you make weapons, of course. However, in making these weapons and testing these weapons, it ends up causing some environmental issues, and it also causes some rips in space and time. Now, one day, John's on his way back home, and outside his house, one of these rifts in time open up, and it sucks him and his very futuristic car back to the future, back in time to the 1800s, 1816, 17, around there anyway. And this is where the fun begins. It's actually very similar to Back to the Future in that Buchanan wanders around town in his futuristic clothes, fancy shoes, cool jacket. He's got his wristwatch as well. So the locals, they don't know what to make of him, and he's in awe of everything he's seeing because, you know, this he did not expect this to happen. Either way, John Hurt does a really good job here. He plays that fish out of water style character really well in this film. He's has that very surprised look, but he also has some real serious moments in it too. So he can flip it both ways. And his character later on that evening, after he arrives in the 1800s, heads to a tavern to have dinner, and he ends up meeting a fellow scientist who turns out to be none other than Victor Frankenstein, played by the magnificent Raul Julia. And at first, Buchanan's obviously surprised by this, but they end up talking about science and shit, and you know they get along. They have a mutual respect for each other. Well, the next day he ends up meeting Mary Shelley, played by Bridget Fonda, and Mary Shelley is in the early stages of writing a new book. It doesn't have a title for it. Obviously, we know what that is, and Buchanan knows what that is. And in just chatting with Mary, he kind of gets a good feeling with her and begins to form a bond with her. But at the same time, he knows he has to get back home, so he enlists the help of Dr. Frankenstein, who's obviously the smartest guy for around that time. However, it's not all going to be smooth sailing because time rips start appearing in the 1800s because of Buchanan's presence. And then we've got the issue with Frankenstein's monster who's out and about causing trouble. I'm not going to spoil, major parts of the story, okay? But obviously, if you've read the novel, like Frankenstein Unbound is based on a 1970s novel, which is obviously based on Frankenstein. So if you've read either, you'll know the beats of the story, okay? But let me tell you about Raul Julia, the legend playing Victor Frankenstein. Holy cow. This to me is the best on screen performance of Dr. Frankenstein I've seen. I'm not joking either. For some people, they might say Kenneth Branagh, others might say Peter Cushing, but for me, Raul Julia delivers. And it's not the mad scientist, okay? It's not the craziness here. He is ruthless. He is uncompromising and unflinching. And I think that's how the character should always have been played. I guess Kenneth Branagh's was okay, but I think Raul Julia steps it up a notch. And oh, this is actually a bit of a funny part of it. The monster. Now, of course, he wants to be loved. He wants a bride. He's not asking for much, obviously, but the monster actually looks cool. but when you see him in action, you'll get it. You'll get that B grade, almost 80s B grade film here. The way it way it yeah goes through, and the way he moves around, the way he talks, his mannerisms, it's a little comical. And the way Buchanan and Frankenstein communicate with this monster, oh, they agitate him big time. They piss him off like there's no tomorrow. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, ooh, like don't don't piss him off any further because he's going to do something crazy, this monster. uh, Obviously I'm not going to spoil it, but guys, to be honest, Frankenstein Unbound, if you want to see a fun, low budget B film, it's got that sci-fi horror element in there. I recommend checking this out. I give it a 6 out of 10, so I'm not saying it's like top tier. It's slightly above average, but it will surprise you if you watch it. If you can get past the, as I say, the low budget part of it, if you can just, you know, get past that, I think you'll have fun with this film. I do actually hope they try and make a new version of this. I'd love to see this on the big screen with a bigger budget. But hey, that's it for me today. Till next time, Leftover Monkey out.